After The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, no one could get enough of overhead adventure games. The Soul Blazer trilogy, The Twisted Tales of Spike McFang, and Crusader of Senti all tried in various ways to recapture the fun and excitement of that classic, while still trying to provide a distinct experience as well. In 1997, Matrix Software tried the same with Alundra, which came out in North America in 1998 on the Sony PlayStation. Interestingly enough, Alundra is considered a spiritual successor to Landstalker for the Sega Genesis. This is because several members of the development team at Climax Entertainment created that game, and you can tell from the graphical style and thematic similarities that they are related. While Landstalker used an isometric view, Alundra is an overhead action adventure game. You have one button to open chests, use your weapon, or converse with non-player characters. There are also buttons for special items, running, and jumping. Getting through Alundra requires solving a lot of puzzles. You'll notice this right away. There are many areas where you have to utilize movable objects to advance, use switches to open up passageways, or jump between platforms to progress. That's one of the standout things about Alundra compared to almost any other adventure game, including A Link to the Past. The ability to jump expands the gameplay in all sorts of ways that we haven't really seen before. I'll go as far as to say that this game features some of the best puzzles I've ever seen. Some of them require memorization, others require creativity, and yet others just poking around until you understand an area better. It's a lot like A Link to the Past, but I'd say the puzzles overall are a bit more challenging. You play the role of Alundra, an elf-like silent protagonist. As an Elna, he belongs to a race of people that are able to enter into the minds and dreams of others. One day, a mysterious figure called Lars tells him he must venture to Inoa. He calls him Releaser, and says he must save his fellow villagers from the evil of Melzos. Alundra is definitely more story-driven than other games of its kind, and some elements are dark. Many characters suffer immensely from the evils of the world. The game does have a few brighter moments, but it's a pretty dim affair in general. There are also several deaths that transpire, and they're depicted in a depressing way, which makes the title stand out from many more lighthearted titles. The story of Alundra revolves around death, fate, religion, and the purpose of life in ways that will surprise some players, and it really explores the severity of depression more than any other game I've played. Thematically, it's much more similar to action-adventure games like Terranigma compared to its cheerier counterparts. The English localization was done by Working Designs, the same company that brought us Dragon Force and the Lunar games. In some of my other videos, I've covered why Working Designs releases were so special, but Alundra was probably one of their least spectacular localizations. It didn't have any crazy extras or special packaging or anything like that. The translation was also a little less over the top than some other Working Designs releases, and certainly adopted more mature themes. For better or worse, they didn't reinvent the wheel for Alundra like they did for many aspects of Lunar. Fairly or unfairly, Alundra has been called a Zelda clone. This is seen by some as a slight, but honestly, I see it as a compliment. Few overhead adventure games come close to matching the greatness of A Link to the Past, but this one did, at least to the degree people compare the two titles. The ability to jump and the prominence of elevation expand the gameplay far beyond the 2D Zelda titles do also. So this was a far more ambitious game than most people think. There will be many people frustrated by jumping into the wrong area or falling down to a level you didn't intend to. Like you may imagine, the bosses in Alundra are all uniquely designed and pose a special challenge. I thought this fact was more noticeable here than in other titles as well, because you spend so much time solving puzzles and beating down normal enemies that the bosses provide a special moment. Some are vulnerable only at certain times, which requires you to move around the battlefield and strike at the right moment. Others use powerful special attacks that must be avoided. One boss even splits into an array of, gargoyle things that are susceptible to the Earth Scroll. I thought the soundtrack was about average in terms of quality, and it's something you definitely expect from a game like this. There are some fantasy-oriented melodies with strings, percussion, and woodwinds, but much of the soundtrack has an ambient vibe. It also has the same composer as Shining Force and Shining Force 2, so you'll definitely recognize similarities between those scores and Alundra. The uplifting songs are perfectly complemented by downtrodden samples, and there's a lot of variety to enjoy throughout the game. If you do play all the way through it, I think you'll come to appreciate the way that each song was woven into the narrative. Nothing seems out of place. At the very tail end of the PlayStation's life cycle, the system actually did get a sequel to Alundra. Alundra II came out in March of 2000 in North America, but it failed to make as big of an impact as the first title did. Instead of Working Designs, the sequel was published by Activision, and the game had a much different look and feel compared to the original. The overhead, Zelda-like experience was replaced by a fully polygonal 3D experience with a spinning camera. Today, most fans have much more fondness for the first Alundra game, and I have to agree with them. Overall, Alundra is a really solid game that doesn't get the credit it deserves. It was very well received by critics upon its release, but you might not know it because it's been overshadowed by a lot of other titles on the system. Graphically, it won't blow you out of the water, but the sprites and visuals certainly hold up better than the 3D games from this period. It's more puzzle intensive than many of its counterparts, which may turn some players off, but this fact also gives the player more accomplishment by advancement. If you like The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, you'll really love this one. It's probably the game most similar to that on the PlayStation. Also, fans of Lufia 2 on the SNES will also enjoy the types of puzzles it has. It might be the most underrated action-adventure game on the PlayStation, so you can't afford to miss out on it. In 1998, North American gamers were treated to Alundra, a wonderful action RPG that emphasized puzzle completion and action-oriented gameplay. The title was very well received and given an impressive localization by Working Designs. Its follow-up, Alundra II, aimed to recreate the appeal of the first but with a new 3D look, and it arrived on the PlayStation in North America in 2000. It featured the same developer, Matrix Software, but with new publisher Activision instead of Working Designs. Keep in mind, the game hit shelves when interest in the PlayStation was waning. The PlayStation 2 was mere months away, and many fans had moved on to new frontiers. In Alundra 2, you play as Flint, a famed pirate hunter in the kingdom of Varuna that is wanted for treason and searching for the pirates that caused the death of his parents. The king has been recently kidnapped and his throne usurped by Baron Diaz, an evil schemer plotting to marry Princess Alexia, the king's daughter. In the process of infiltrating an airship, Flint finds a swarm of humanoid robots and a group of pirates, Zeppo, Albert, and Ruby. As he finds out, a powerful sorcerer named Mephisto is using magical wind-up keys to create the robots, which are designed as killing machines. After a scuffle with them, the ship becomes damaged and crashes into the sea. Flint washes ashore and is taken in by a villager, and the story takes off from there. For those that love the original Alundra, the graphics of Alundra 2 will probably be the biggest disappointment. The original game was marketed toward those that loved titles like The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past and Lufia 2, and the graphical style was certainly influenced by those games. Alundra 2, on the other hand, uses 3D polygonal worlds and 3D polygonal characters. The camera's default position is also very close and way too zoomed in for my tastes. You can press select to zoom it out, but even this doesn't give you much more of a broadened view. Spinning the camera is also jerky and doesn't look quite right. The movement and animations are very buggy, and elevated terrain will make your character move in odd ways. It just looks like the game wasn't thoroughly tested. I can say this, it's certainly not the worst usage of 3D in an RPG I've seen on the PlayStation. Grandstream Saga. But it's not polished and doesn't come close to games like The Legend of Dragoon, where the polygonal character style actually looks pretty good. You have a normal attack button and a button for special items, which mostly matches the experience of the first Alundra. If you find enough puzzle pieces, you can learn combos that let you swing your sword more than one time in a string. There aren't any levels, so you gain more health and elemental points by buying and finding special items throughout the game. Just like the original, Alundra 2 does focus on puzzles, jumping onto multi-level blocks and platforms, and defeating bosses. In fact, I'll give the game that. The bosses are actually really cool. They were all big and imposing with special abilities, and they were all uniquely designed, so fighting against them was always pretty fun. Take a look at this big crocodile with a mushroom growing out of its back. Now that was just unique. It really is goofy though, which matches the impression you'll get through most of the game. The characters and story simply aren't interesting, and the puzzles pale in comparison to the first. Also, the voice acting in Alundra II is ridiculously corny. The story is ultra cheesy, and a lot of odd situations and dialogue occur that really threw me off. It seemed like the game was trying to do too much at times. Unfortunately, it pales in comparison to the original Alundra in every single way, and can be safely overlooked by RPG fanatics. Given what the original was, I'm surprised this one got greenlit at all, and I think it will disappoint almost everyone. You may actually like it if you played almost every other RPG on the platform, but there's still plenty of higher priority action RPGs to play instead of this one. In the grand scheme of things, the Alundra games flew under the radar. The first became a cult classic, but the second has become almost forgotten. Unfortunately, it seems likely the stark stylistic change between the two games was the downfall of the series. The developer of the Alundra franchise, Matrix Software, continued making games and still exists today. The company never created a third Alundra title, but did incorporate some elements of the series into their other titles, such as Dual Hearts. The lack of a committed publisher or the relative failure of the second game may have convinced them it was time to move on. For its part, Working Designs closed its door in 2005 after several conflicts with Sony over licensing rights for the PlayStation 2. Still, many fans remember the first Alundra game especially as one of the publisher's best titles, a game that really put the company on the map for a lot of people. You can still find the first Alundra game on the PlayStation Network, but there just aren't many ways to play the two titles today outside of getting the original versions. Thankfully, both games are reasonably priced online and you shouldn't have much trouble obtaining them. Personally, I could do without the sequel entirely, but I thought the first Alundra game represented a critical evolution beyond The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past and the Soul Blazer games that still sticks with me today. Make it a point to prioritize that one over every other PlayStation action RPG. So what do you think? What did you remember about the Alundra series? Let me know in the comments below. Do you have any special nostalgic stories from it? I want to hear from you. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell for more retro gaming content, and join my Discord community linked in the description. Also, please consider supporting my channel via YouTube's Join feature to receive member exclusives such as advanced videos and complete video transcripts.